Hello, and welcome to Politics at Jack and Sam's, the podcast that gives you everything you need to know about the day ahead on the campaign trail.
Hello there, my name is Sam Coates from Sky News, and with me is Jack Blanchard of Politico, and it's Friday morning, day 9 of the campaign, and there are 34 days left to go until Election Day.
Already been a long week for the party leaders, Sam. They've been putting in the campaign miles. We've got Rishi Sunak and Kier Starmer miles out of London again today. But let's face it, the campaign has been totally overshadowed by the news last night coming out of New York. You know, we need to be picking the 3 big things each day on this podcast, Sam, that everyone's going to be talking about. Well, the big thing that everyone's going to be talking about today has nothing to do with the general election.
That's right. Donald Trump has been convicted on all 34 counts of falsifying business records. And the impact on the general election will be to completely blow the news agenda out of the water. That's our top item. What else have we got today, Jack?
The ongoing purge of the left within the Labour Party is still a massive story on Friday, and would have been the big item today were it not for Donald Trump. We'll be talking more about that. And then we've got the first TV debate now only a few days away, and you can bet your bottom dollar that both party leaders will be spending much of the coming weekend preparing for that, because that is going to be the first moment that a lot of people actually tune into this election campaign for the first time. Let's start with Donald Trump, though, because, I mean, that is a news story of a different magnitude to anything that is happening here in the UK. Just tell people briefly where we're at with it, Sam, if they've been, I don't know, they went to bed early and they've been hiding under a rock since they woke up.
I mean, it was dramatic stuff on the telly last night. Donald Trump was convicted of fraud by 7 men and 5 women on a New York jury who declared he was guilty on 34 counts of falsifying business records to conceal payments made to a porn star during his 2016 campaign for the White House. Now, listening to the experts, reading the papers this morning, it doesn't sound like he's going to get the jail term that you could get with that conviction, which is up to 4 years. But also, the sentence is likely to take a year, meaning that we have no idea quite what happens next, although apparently he could not go into the White House and pardon himself. That isn't an option, but just saying that sentence out loud tells you just what another dimension US politics is spinning into.
A couple of things I want to say about this in terms of the UK election. The first thing was that my immediate reaction when this broke last night was they will be cheering in Kier Starmer's office, because the narrative of the UK election campaign had gone off course for Labour. They were putting they had all their items in the grid and nobody was talking about them because they were all talking about the Diane Abbott row and more widely the sort of change in the parliamentary party that Kier Starmer is forcing through this week. And suddenly everyone's talking about something completely different, and that is great news for Kier Starmer. I also just think, I mean, this would have been a massive story at any moment. Clearly, Donald Trump might be president in January next year, and now he's a convicted felon. But it is also indicative, I think, of an election campaign that hasn't really caught the public's imagination massively here yet. We've seen lots of different stories leading the news that are not the election this week. The Rafa story was very big earlier in the week. We had the Daily Mail leading on Lord Lucan the other day rather than the general election. And this is yet another thing that just takes people's attention away from the election. And I actually think that, again, is probably good news for Labour, because they, of course, are the party that don't want anything to change.
That's right. I was in Milton Keynes Market yesterday, and you know, we talked to a lot of people, and the vibe was that they're not yet paying that much attention, even though the whole point of calling the election early from Rishi Sunak's point of view was to focus minds. Now, I understand that when it comes to what's been going on with Donald Trump, when the Prime Minister speaks quite shortly, as he's going to, he's basically just going to try and stay a million miles away from it. He's going to basically say he's not going to get involved in another country's politics. I don't know this, but I'm pretty certain that's what Kier Starmer's going to do as well, even if those on the further fringes of his party might want him to go in harder at what someone who, for some on the left, is considered a complete political enemy. So there will be an attempt for our leaders, our political leaders, not to be in the TV pieces about Donald Trump giving any kind of reaction. But that doesn't mean it has an impact. I have to say, Jack, it comes on a day where it really feels like foreign affairs is impinging on the global news agenda. There was a strike that the RAF took part in last night on the Houthis, a special operation in Yemen, yet another one where the RAF bombed places in Yemen where Houthis were thought to be storing equipment like drones to launch attacks on those shipping containers. And that, funnily enough, is what fairly imminently, in an early morning TV interview, the Prime Minister is going to be talking about. They want the Prime Minister's face to be on a story about foreign affairs, just not the Trump one. And then an extraordinary line coming out of America as well, which feels a bit ominous, which is that Joe Biden, according to Reuters, has quietly authorized Kyiv to launch basically US supplied weaponry at targets inside Russia. To support an offensive to protect the city of Kharkiv. And just having US weaponry involved in that conflict feels like it could have repercussions within the news cycle of this general election. Hold on tight.
I think one thing we can safely say is, given all that is going on around the world, we're not going to see any big shiny new policies announced by the political parties in the campaign today, because they know that nobody will be paying attention. And you can imagine them sort of tearing up their grids in CCHQ and Lotto and going to the pub for the day, because this is not going to be a newsy day. Nevertheless, we should talk about the ongoing problems within the Labour campaign and within the Labour Party, because it is still a very important story. Keir Starmer's up in Scotland this morning with Anas Sarwar, and indeed with Angela Rayner, talking about GB Energy, which is the Labour's clean energy policy. But the only thing anyone really wants to talk to him about is his row with Diane Abbott and with the wider left of the Labour Party. Now, we talked about this on the podcast yesterday, Sam. It's fair to say it has developed over the last 24 hours. We saw Angela Rayner coming out on Diane Abbott's side, which is a proper split between the top of the leadership and the deputy leader. And there is reporting in the Times today that the leader's office are very unhappy about that, which would not be a surprise were that to be true. But I'm also fascinated to see some more characters being parachuted into Labour safe seats over the last 12 hours, who are going to clearly form a sort of core Starmerite faction in the Parliamentary Labour Party after this election. And we were talking yesterday about the need to think beyond the election campaign and into what the next Parliament looks like. The stuff that's happening in the Labour Party this week in terms of people being selected to be MPs is going to be really, really important to us all after the election.
That's right. I think the scale of the difficulty that Keir Starmer could have with Angela Rayner, I think, is one of the enduring bits of this. Even if the row between Starmer and the left potentially drifts from voters' minds or was never noticed in the first place, if there's a division at the top, that's complicated. And I think we all want to know what Angela Rayner was doing talking to Faiza Shaheen, who was the deselected candidate, the left-wing candidate who was suddenly deselected in Duncan Smith's Chingford seat. Angela Rayner phoned her, I think it was around the time of her Newsnight interview. Exactly what was she saying to her? Was she being disloyal about what effectively were the moves of the Starmer project? Look, I'd recommend everybody to read a great column by Patrick Maguire in the Times today, which basically says this, more or less, was always the plan, has been the plan for years, because what Keir Starmer has done has been to subcontract the reshaping of the Labour Party to two individuals, campaign chief Morgan McSweeney and Matt Pound, who ran a pressure group called Labour First. And through all of the period of rule changes and candidate selections, he has never interfered with their project and let them get on with it. And this is now reaching crunch time in the next probably 72 hours to sort of 4 days. And he's just never said no to them. And that means if that continues, if Diane Abbott continues to try and stand as a Labour candidate when she gets to the NEC having to endorse her candidate, well, Patrick Maguire calls the NEC, Labour's ruling body, a Starmerite Politburo, and suggests her candidacy at that point will be blocked, presumably against Angela Rayner's wishes. The crunch at that point will be inescapable.
I think what's important to talk about briefly, Sam, is why it matters that all these people are being drafted in as Labour MPs at the very last minute. People who are seen to be either on the right of the Labour Party, people like Mark Ferguson, who ran Liz Kendall's 2015 election campaign, or people like Chris Ward, who was one of Starmer's very, very closest aides for many years, well known in Westminster, left politics briefly to be a consultant and is now coming back in as an MP in a safe seat.
And the subject of a savage attack by Owen Jones, the Corbynite ally, last night. Extraordinarily aggressive, I thought.
There are enough of these people who have been parachuted into safe seats this week by Starmer's operation that they are going to create a new faction of themselves in the Parliamentary Labour Party after this election. One of the criticisms or maybe problems Starmer has had as an MP is he's never had his own gang in Parliament. He was always seen as quite an outsider. He came in as Director of Public Prosecutions and he never had loads of mates who were his MPs, who were MPs. He's managed to rise to the top of the Labour Party anyway. It looks like he's on course to be Prime Minister. After this election, he will have that gang because they have been created this week through this process. The purging of left-wingers and the replacement by Starmerites and much more right-wing candidates within the context of the Labour Party who will form a sort of guard around Kier Starmer after this election and put him in a much more powerful position within his party. The other thing to say about Sam, is it's going to create an almighty battle for jobs after this election. You know, that Labour has a shadow front bench all there waiting, expecting to walk into ministerial jobs if they win this election. A lot of the people who are being parachuted in this week will be expected to be getting jobs in a Labour government. And so that's going to leave an awful lot of unhappy Labour MPs who thought they were going to be the shadow minister for paperclips or whatever else, suddenly finding that there aren't enough jobs to go around. So that's another thing that's going to be fun to watch for after this election, if indeed Labour do win it.
What a great day for Angela Rayner to be launching her battle bus and phoning her predecessor, John Prescott, to wish him a happy 86th birthday. We ought to talk very quickly about the debates. They start next week. And this is interesting. I picked up this morning the Tories are making a very big deal of these TV debates. Sky's in a couple of weeks, but the first one is on Tuesday. 9 p.m. In Salford, hosted by Julie Etchingham, Kier Starmer and Rishi Sunak head-to-head. And it's the Tories that are amping this up. I mean, unsurprising, given that they are, our poll of polls has 21 points behind in the polls. They're saying it's very important because Starmer has spent all week making speeches and saying nothing. Bring it on. And they're going to try and use it to frame him, Kier Starmer, as somebody who doesn't have a plan, unsurprisingly, and Rishi Sunak is somebody who does. Rishi Sunak is going to be doing his prep a little bit on Saturday, but largely on Sunday. So he's taking it very seriously. But it's a big call for them to elevate these debates so high. They need a decent win. They had some success highlighting Labour's difficulty on VAT this week, but they need something much, much bigger to change the polls.
That's right. For Starmer, it really is, keep it steady as she goes. There's a YouGov poll in the Times today. The survey was only done over the last couple of days, which puts Labour 25 points ahead in this election. Now, that suggests that after the whole of the first week of the campaigning, the Tories deploying some big eye-catching policies, such as the national service thing, the tax cut for pensioners, things that, poll reasonably well as individual policies. They have not shifted the dial a tiny bit yet. And that will be worrying for people in CCHQ, to say the least, because there are only so many opportunities you have during the election campaign to actually grab people's attention. They've had the sort of big launch moment. I wouldn't say that went brilliant. They've had the first big eye-catching policies moment. That doesn't seem to have shifted very much at all. And now we've got the next thing, which is this first TV debate on Tuesday. And as I said before, that will be the first moment that for a lot of people even really notice this election campaign is happening when they switch on the TV at prime time and look, it's those two guys slugging it out on TV. The question is, has Rishi Sunak really got what it takes to deliver a game-changing moment in a TV debate? We can talk more about that next week, but it doesn't feel like to me he is that guy who just, really tears it up and leaves you absolutely gobsmacked at his incredible debating ability. But he needs to do something because so far nothing has really changed in this campaign, and we are now 9 days in, and there's only a month to go. So yeah, he needs to get it right this weekend if he's gonna pull something out of the bag.
I still couldn't tell you who's going to come out better. It's just that Labour want things to stay as they are, and the Tories need a massive upset. Anyway, Jack, it's the end of your holiday, the least relaxing holiday you've ever had.
I think that probably is about right. Yes, the quote-unquote holiday comes to an end today. I'm heading back to London to join the fray. I took a brief stroll down the beach yesterday and tried to see if anybody was even vaguely interested in the general election here in North Wales, and the answer came back a resounding not one bit. But who knows? Maybe during the final weeks of the campaign, public engagement is going to go through the roof and this thing's really going to take off. So let's hope so. Anyway, Sam, you have definitely not been on holiday this week. You've been pretty much everywhere around the country already. How have you been surviving? Have you got any tips as I return to the campaign trail?
Yes, we took delivery of 60 bottles of meal replacement drink this week. It's a much better way of surviving on the road than crisps and snacks and biscuits. So don't look under my desk. That's my message to my bosses.
I don't think I've got the stomach for that. All right, look, we're not going to do this daily podcast over the weekend because it's still the weekend and everyone deserves a little bit of downtime. But we will be back in your ears at the same time on Monday morning. Sam, I will look forward to seeing you then.
See you then.